Texas A&M a couple weeks into camp. Of course, Mike Elko gets that grace period, that honeymoon, but maybe it doesn't last too long at Texas A&M considering their high standards, the resources involved, and the disappointments of recent years. But Elko comes back to Texas A&M, of course, to win championships. We got Cameron Honesty on the line from Aggies Wire. Please like the video, subscribe right here. Head on over to Aggies Wire. Check out Cameron's work. Cameron, how you doing today?
Doing well. How are you, man?
I'm good. I am good. We just want to catch up on fall camp. But before we do that, of course, the commitment coming in from DJ Sanders is a huge one. Of course, he was coveted by just about everyone across the board, and Texas A&M was able to get that one done.
That was a big one, taking him from Texas. Obviously, the recruiting this summer has been interesting with Texas entering the SEC, obviously being the rivals they are. It's now going to be a tougher recruiting battle year after year in the state. Obviously, the defensive line for A&M has been the strength coming into this season with Elko. Obviously, he's been known for trying to build through the trenches and then build, go through the secondary, try to build the defense that way. So getting Sanders right now is huge. I mean, the continuation going into next year of who they're going to return. Obviously, this season, you've got already a loaded defensive line. So for Aggie fans who have kind of seen how the recruiting has gone, maybe missing out on some of the premier wide receivers has been tough to see. But at the same time, that will come with better offensive play. But right now, we know the strength is defensive line. So I'm not surprised. It was a surprise to many, but I had heard through some recruiting guys that I discussed with over the past 2 weeks that this was something that could happen. And the relationship he built with Elko is great, and he's going to be a great addition next season.
And another commitment here just in the last few days out of Spring, Texas, Joshua Moses, an interior offensive lineman. All right, we get to fall camp, and let's stay right there because we have the strength of the team, defensive line. It's stacked with guys coming back and Nick Scorton joining from Purdue. So the defensive line seems to be very much in place. Anything there in regards to backup positions or key components there as you take us through the defense? Of course, big losses in linebacker. Scooby Williams comes in from Florida.
Yeah, so I would say kind of the drumbeat that's building. I think that's one of the terms we all use when camps arrive, whether it's college football, NFL, what guys are standing out day after day at a consistent manner. Shamar Stewart, who's coming into his junior season, has been, and I think a lot of recruiting people know, he was the number one player in the 2022 class out of Florida. This is a guy, I think he's listed right now, and it's kind of hilarious even saying it. I think he's 6'6", 290. I mean, and he's going to be playing defensive end. This is somebody who could play defensive line, kind of shift inside of the 4-eye. He's that strong. He's that fast. He's that athletic. He has been a guy who I think he broke the sled actually during their 6th practice. I mean, he's just that strong. It's incredible to see because he's a player that we've just been waiting to take that next step. And he had a presser on, I believe it was Monday, where he has very lofty goals. He wants 15 sacks, this season. And a lot of us kind of heard that and went, okay, that's I don't know if that's going to happen, but you got to think Nick Scorton had 10 last season, could have had more with Purdue. And this is a guy in Stewart who has all the talent, and he's finally learning all those fundamentals that maybe he wasn't quite up to snuff with last season and in his freshman year, but he got close a lot of the time. One of our better reporters, Carter Carroll's at a gig in 24/7 Sports, kind of noted that if you watch the film, and I went back and actually watched the last 3 or 4 games, Stewart was very close to getting sacks. Almost every play he was on the field, he was getting in the backfield, he was getting his hand there. It didn't happen. So I think you're finally going to see, with Scorton now creating that pressure on the outside, guys like David Hicks and DJ Hicks and Gabriel Brown-Lodindi and a very deep, and Shamar Turner on the inside, a very deep defensive line where they can rotate guys in. Pressure's going to come up the middle, and then that's going to submerge inside, and you're going to have 2 of these guys just wreaking havoc. And another name that I think a lot of Aggie fans maybe have forgotten because they got so many transfer portal players, Cassius Howell, who's one of the premier edges coming out of Bowling Green, had 9.5 sacks last year. He was a guy that defense coordinator Jay Bateman mentioned in one of the pressers this week of saying he's a guy to really watch. Very versatile. We can put him pretty much anywhere, but I think he's going to be placed on the edge, but playing full-time edge for the most part, cleaning up runs, providing a lot of pass rush. So the defensive line is going to be the strength of this team. I have no doubt about it. That's an area that I think everybody's just excited to see. While everywhere else, it's kind of, it's prove it, because every season, the definite strength. And then everywhere else is kind of like, well, I think they're good here, but I just want to see it play out.
15 sacks. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. That's Will Anderson, Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Chase Young, Aiden Hutchinson kind of stuff right there. But it does happen. There are guys that are able to do it. Usually like one guy per season nationally, something in that range.
He certainly has the talent for it. So
I mentioned Scooby Williams coming in from Florida to help the linebacker core. Of course, Edgerrin Cooper's gone. If you can take us through the rest of the defense in regards to what battles are ensuing.
So defensively for the linebacker core specifically, I wouldn't say they're a work in progress. I think having Torrin York coming back after having one of the best freshman seasons we've seen, especially with A&M, this was like 3-star recruit coming out. He was actually committed to Baylor, decommitted, almost committed to Duke with Elko during his time there. So he's got a close relationship with Elko, who's been recruiting him for years. He's a guy that you can rely on. Obviously, Solomon DeShields coming in from Pitt is a very reliable backer, very athletic guy who they're trying to find out what his position specifically and his usage at the linebacker corps is. And there's a couple other names. Scooby Williams is one of them. He's been doing very well so far in camp, doing everything they ask him to do. This is a guy who I think during his first season at Florida, he was extremely productive. And then he had some lapses, some kind of boneheaded plays here and there, and, missing things in coverage, missing tackles. But again, very, very talented, with a high 4-star recruit coming in. Jay Bateman, who's the linebacker coach at Florida, knows how to use him correctly. And that's the biggest thing that's going to push this group forward to actually being a consistent group outside of York. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, outside of coverage, they probably don't have to do as much. Even the defensive line is so good, especially against the run. These guys just clean it up, but obviously be consistent in coverage, especially in that middle passing game. But that's a group that I think after the first week against Notre Dame and then going into I think their bout with Arkansas, they're going to go against some really good run teams, and we'll kind of find out what they have there. But obviously Torrin York, I think this is going to be an all SEC linebacker season for him. But yeah, 2 names, obviously Solomon DeShields, Scooby Williams is a guy who I do think will play more. And there's a couple other names back there, but they're still kind of weeding things out in camp. And then the biggest area I think that everybody's been paying attention, especially us, is the secondary. I mean, the cornerback room last year was horrific. Jimbo Fisher, one of the things that could have gotten him fired, to be perfectly honest with you, was the lack of urgency in the transfer portal to get starting level talent at the cornerback position. Elko, all he had to do was watch, 3 games, I think, of the 23 season against, 2 of them were against Ole Miss and Alabama, were 2 of their ex-wide receivers who weren't that athletic, just fast enough and big on the outside. They just murdered A&M secondary. I mean, 2 of them had over 200 yards received. I think forgetting the Ole Miss receiver, Trey
Harris.
Trey Harris, yeah. I think he had about 210 against them or something. I mean, it was brutal because they just didn't have the size, they didn't have the experience. So they went out there. They got guys in Will Lee Jr. from Kansas State, BJ Mays from UAB, 2 of the top coverage corners. And then you've got a lot of guys inside, especially in the slot position. We're talking about recruiting. Terry Bussey, who we all know was the best athlete in the 24 class. That kid can do it all, but Elko and Bateman had both noted that he's most likely going to play corner his first year. Obviously, going into next season in his sophomore year, we could see him at wide receiver, kind of in some special packages. But he's battling right now for a potential starting slot position, which is a surprise to many, or at least a rotational spot because of his athleticism, because of his tracking speed, and because of his ball skills. So they've got a lot of options there now, which they didn't before. But one of the big names that is coming back for the cornerback room is Tyreek Chappelle. He missed a lot of the season last year due to injury. He actually entered the transfer portal briefly, came back. He is their senior dependable guy. So I think you have a lot of bodies out there. You have a lot of talent. You got a lot of guys with experience. And then you got someone like Chappelle to kind of lead the way. I think that group is going to be much improved. I don't know if they're going to be a strength of the team, but I think they're going to be much, much better than they were last. I mean, you got to be better than you were last year because A&M literally, I would say, should have probably ended the season with 8 to 9 wins, but because of how poor they were in pass defense, you end up ending, going 7-6 on the year. So
Cameron Honesty's breaking down some Texas A&M football for us. Of course, we're about halfway through camp, and the opener is August 31st, and it's a big one against Notre Dame and Kyle Field. And you can catch Cameron's work at Aggies Wire. Please subscribe here at the Voice of College Football and like the video. Get that out of the way. And you mentioned the dominance of the defensive front that, for as good as it's been, might be at its peak this year, might be better than previous editions. And the offensive line, which has been good in the past, was not good this past season. Sometimes coaches resort to, in that type of situation, having to help out one unit so the other unit can just operate and the quarterback can stay, upright and actually complete some passes. I don't know if that's going on in camp, but I guess I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case.
So again, and I knew we were going to get this, probably good to kind of end with this, is that, the offensive line, it's a wild card, but again, we've been talking about this for, I feel like the last 6 months of what they need to do to improve. First of all, that was getting a new O-line coach and bringing in Adam Cushing, who has a very good, people keep mentioning his very poor head coaching career. That does not matter when you're coaching position groups. So this is somebody who has developed guys at Northwestern, Duke, obviously sending Graham Barton to the NFL as a first-round pick with his last 2 seasons at Duke. He's a developmental coach. He knew the roster overall. This is a offensive line roster that has a ton of size. These are all blue chip recruits, a lot of them. They have them in droves. And so it's not like they were lacking any talent. They were lacking, and as I said previously, fundamentals. These guys were blocking air sometimes. They just didn't know where to go. And so finally that's getting fixed in camp. And credit to Mike Elko. He's been very honest with how this group is kind of panning out. How he never said, and coaches have done this over the past, that they've done pressers. They want to get the fans excited. They kind of say, well, everybody's doing well. They're doing better. They're doing better. And I think someone asked, I forget who asked the question of, well, how's the O-line progressing? Well, it's you hope it's a strength. And he was right. You hope it's a strength. You hope, because it does happen every year. Sometimes O-lines just magically get better and the blocking gets better. The pass protection gets much better. And like you said, guys have time to throw. Your offense finally just, gets more consistent and productive and But at the same time, A&M last year, we talked about, oh man, no, the O-line should be much improved just because of talent alone. Well, it happened to be coaching. Steve Adazio, who obviously lost his position. I don't know what went on there. It could have just been a mess overall with Jimbo Fisher's coaching tactics and everything. But you get the feel that this isn't going to be an elite unit, but it's going to be a good to very good unit. And it starts with moving Chase Basantis back to guard where he's supposed to be. During his freshman year, he's thrown in the fire at right tackle because Reuben Fatherly, who I don't know if a lot of people remember, was one of the better right tackles, held Will Anderson pretty much the entire game from getting in the backfield against Alabama during the 21 season. He's finally returning after injury issues, so he should solidify that bookend spot. Moving Basantis back to most likely right guard. This is a kid who I think he's about 6'6", 320 right now, has been making waves this summer of how strong he is. I think he was squatting over 600 pounds for 3 or 4 reps. And when you're that strong and you have good hands and you're very athletic, go to guard, because that's where your NFL potential is. And that's how he can help this team the most. But the biggest position that's been garnering a lot of attention this during camp is at center. And so Bryce Foster is gone. So Bryce Foster, is now gone to Kansas. The era of him, uh, being on and off and, being an all SEC player to being one of the worst offensive linemen is finally over. We wish him the best. He's a very talented guy. It's just when you think about, Connor Weedman's injury last season, for example, it was just pass rush coming up the middle, it was pressure coming up the middle. I mean, the middle of the offensive line, the interior just broke down during any type of basic, twist and stunt, and that just cannot happen, especially in the SEC. So knowing that Foster was a liability, Mike Elko actually cut him from the team earlier this season, and knew that, look, we're going to have a pure competition there. So sophomore Mark Naboo, who played, I think he started 3 or 4 games at center last season. He's the front runner right now, but also Utah transfer Coley, I cannot pronounce it, Fananu, I believe. He was a starter for Utah, I believe, for eight games last season. He's a guy who's been pretty consistent at center. But another name that's now come up, out of nowhere has been Cam Dewberry, who is usually playing, he's a rotational guard, specifically left guard, but he's trying to take a shot at the center position. So that's a spot where, we're paying a lot of attention to how it's going every day. We haven't gotten a lot of updates. Probably, I think, within the next 2 weeks, you're really going to know, okay, who's the guy who's really taking strides. My money's on Naboo right now. That's just a consistent name. That's somebody who you can trust in the middle. But on the left side, I think that's the strength of this team is Trey Zune, who's returning at left tackle. He was their best O-lineman overall. This is a guy with NFL potential going in the next draft. And Amaj Reed Adams, who from Kansas, was I believe a 3 or 4 year starter at Kansas, one of the best run blockers in the country. I think he's probably solidifying that left guard spot. So I think they're much safer going in. They know who they have. They know who they can count on. It's just the center position is going to keep working itself out, and hoping that Ruben Fatherly can stay healthy at right tackle. But I believe Basantis' move to guard is going to be huge for the run game and the pass game.
Cameron, is there any indication of any progress made by Connor Wegman or anything there to report? I would think that he's just doing his best to, of course, prepare for the season. But of course, everyone wants to hear about the quarterback.
Yeah, no, Connor's looking great. He's got more zip on his throws. He's gotten bigger. He participated in the Manning Passing Academy. We covered that extensively. Again, this is a kid with first round potential. He's got all the ball skills. He's got the accuracy, the touch. Like I said, he's throwing harder. He's finally feeling more comfortable, and that's the biggest thing. Like sometimes when a guy gets injured, and especially they miss the entire season, you deal with a lot of adversity. You see someone take your job, but you kind of see, okay, is my future here? Well, he knew all along, and a lot of people, to be honest, when Jimbo left, were afraid. Is Connor considering going to the transfer portal? Is he considering different options? But he knew all along that this was the place for him and that he could develop, especially when Elko hired Colin Klein as offensive coordinator. And I think they've gelled, and they know he knows how to use a guy like Connor, because I believe Kansas State's incoming sophomore quarterback is kind of similar to how Connor plays. And I mean, this is a very tough kid. He's willing to run if he has to. I don't think that's going to be something they probably do to start the season just because he's coming off an injury, but he's looking sharp. This could, again, we talk about the O-line. If the O-line can just pass protect, give him time, I think he's going to have his biggest year. And I think he's really going to solidify his high draft status, which a lot of people, put him as the number 1 quarterback in the 25 draft over and over. And so I think he has a lot to prove this season, but again, protect him. Wide receivers, do your job, just get open. He will find you. And I think that's the biggest part of what we want to see, is that you just want to see this team move the ball down the field, because that was even just hard to do last season. But that did happen the first 4 games. When he got out, it started to get stagnant. So I think he's the key to just getting things going, because the offense will improve under Klein. It will improve in the running game. It will improve in the passing game. It's just let the kid eat, let the kid protect him. I think he's going to be fantastic.
8 touchdowns, 2 picks in 3.5 games for Connor Wegman. And of course, Texas A&M wants 13, 14, 15 games out of him. Last thing would be the Notre Dame game. So for College Football Nation, that's a bonus. That's a plus. We want to see excellent games. But is that a good thing for a program, new head coach, new coordinators, new start, not to break it in with a couple cupcakes?
I think that's what Elko wants, to be honest with you. A&M over the years, especially under Fisher, they were playing a lot of, as you said, cupcake openers. It didn't challenge them at all. Then they would go into, an Alabama or even Arkansas and kind of get shell shock and get scored on early and, have to adjust. And I think knowing that Elko has some I guess, familiarity with Notre Dame, especially Marcus Freeman. He has familiarity with Riley Leonard, obviously, who he coached. He's mentioned that, numerous times. I wish I could. I wish I could, coach against anybody else to open the season. But Notre Dame's dealing with some issues right now, losing their left tackle for the season. Obviously, earlier this week. I mean, that's horrible to hear. It really is. But you do have to look at it strategically. This is advantage A&M, I think, because we've been talking about the entire show. A&M's defensive line and pass rush is going to be the key to them winning any of these games this season, especially opening up against a blue chip opponent who I believe in USA Today's rankings was number 7 in the country. So you're going to be the number 20 team hosting the number 7 team to open, and you want to get this program off to the right track under Elko. That's the way to do it. I mean, that's the way to open things up in Kyle Field in front of a sold out sold out Kyle Field. It's probably gonna be close to sold out. And it's it's probably the marquee game to open the season. I would think it's on October 30th or August 31st. So yeah, it's I do think they want it though. I don't think they want to just kind of ease in. I think it's just go full bore if we trust what we have in this team, which I think they do. I don't think they're afraid to prove that, hey, we can hang in the SEC, but we can hang with, the upper echelon teams any week.
Excellent. Good stuff. Cameron Honesty, Aggies Wire. Get on over there. Check out Cameron's work. Appreciate you stopping by, Cameron. Hopefully we can have you back before they kick off against the Irish.
Yeah, for sure.